What a great race that's going to be. Meanwhile, in the Top Fuel pits, this is Scott Coletta's crew preparing to face Pat Austin in the Top Fuel semifinal. We'll be back with more from Indianapolis Raceway Park after this. This is our first look at the Pro Stock class. This is Scott Jeffreyon, the second qualifier, facing Lewis Worden in the semifinal. Jeffreyon in the near lane, Worden in the far lane.
And unlike the Top Fuel races and funny cars, these are the gear jammers. You just don't stand on the throttle. And here you can see that Warren Johnson has more than a dominant points lead, 12,930 to 9,584 for Scott Jeffreyon. The real fight in the points is between Scott and Warren's son Kurt to see who ends up second. They don't want it to be a sweep for the Johnson family, if you know what I mean.
Lewis Worden being guided back into position, and as Frank told us earlier, for some unknown reason, this guy always seems to do well at the U.S. Nationals. Scott Jeffreyon, he's the number 2 qualifier. He beat Joe Lapone and Jim Yates to get to the semis.
And you'll be on board with Scott Jeffreyon here in the Dodge Daytona. See his right hand on the shifter. There's actually 4 levers they pull in the 5-speed. 2,350 pounds, 500 cubic inches maximum. Racing gasoline, the most competitive class in all of NHRA drag racing. Well, you guys at home won another one. Scott Jeffreyon goes into the final round with a sizzling 7:17 at 192 miles an hour. This is the perfect racetrack for that short wheelbase Dodge Daytona. It gets all the grip it needs.
Well, here we go. Johnson and Johnson. There's Warren Johnson doing the burnout. And in the opposite lane, Warren's son, Kurt. These are not team cars. These guys go hard at each other. This will be the 7th time these two have gone head-to-head, and the old man doesn't give anything. Kurt has won only 1 time in national event competition. As these two prepare to do battle, we have one in the finals, and Steve Evans is with Scott Jeffreyon at the far end.
Well, Scott, you have been on your game today, a 7:17.
Well, it's not me as much as it is these guys from Wayne County and Mopar. They're behind me. They give me this rocket ship to drive, and I couldn't be more fortunate to be letting the clutch out on this little Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona.
You're going to race a Johnson in the final. Anyone you'd prefer?
Oh, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to run my race, and hopefully we'll come out with a win light at the other end of this racetrack. I'm really happy, Steve.
Well, we know Jeffreyon's going to face a Johnson in the final. Kurt Johnson moving into position to face his father, Warren.
When Scott has time to think about it, I think he'll root for Warren because he is involved in that points battle for the 2nd position with his son, Kurt. Warren Johnson, they call him the Professor. Let me tell you, there's a lot of knowledge in that head. Kurt Johnson, he has learned almost everything that his father knows. As you said, they've raced 6 times and the score is 5-1, so he's got a little bit more to go.
Almost everything is the key word here. Father or son?
It is Warren winning it. Kurt was first off the starting line, but his pop punched him out with performance at 7:16, 193 miles an hour. And we have a classic final set up, Oldsmobile against Dodge.
Here's the pairing for the Pro Stock final. It'll be Warren Johnson, who has lane choice against Scott Jeffreyon. The lane choice wasn't by much, 15 thousandths of a second. Moving along now to the Top Fuel semifinal. This is Doug Herbert burning out, facing Kenny Bernstein. Dale Armstrong and crew had to replace a motor. You remember he went up in flames in the last round, but Bernstein is now ready. As these two prepare, here's Steve with Warren Johnson, who's in the Pro Stock final.
Hey, that boy you raised had a couple of hundreds right off of the mark you had to make up for.
Oh, yeah, you know he was going to take every shot he could. You know, I had a slight performance advantage, but, you know, those kids.
You now have lane choice by 100th of a second as well.
Well, I don't think there's really a whole lot of difference in lanes. NHRA's done a pretty good job on this track today, given the fact we had a little bit of rain and so forth, but we're happy to be there.
Young man, I'd like to say something to you here.
Family feud number 9, I guess you get that one.
These guys are counting match races and everything else when they go head-to-head. Top Fuel now, Bernstein against Herbert.
Kenny Bernstein may have a question mark behind him in the engine bay. He wants to continue winning with Eddie Hill out. There's a points harvest to be had. Look to your left. Kenny Bernstein is, and he sees Doug Herbert come by. Herbert goes to the final at 4.92 seconds, 293 miles an hour. Bernstein was so close. He was first off the starting line, just didn't have the performance.
Here's the replay, and you can see just what kind of a difference it makes to be first off the starting line. Bernstein with the early edge, but at the finish, you'll be able to see just what 1/100th of a second looks like as Doug Herbert comes from behind to just nip Kenny Bernstein and spoil his 49th birthday party at the U.S. Nationals. So for the second year in a row, Doug Herbert is in the finals at the U.S. Nationals, and he's with Steve.
Going to the final round again.
How about that? You know, this morning I wouldn't have bet $1 on myself, I guess. And
I wouldn't either.
yeah, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, these guys are the best that there is, and when you beat them, it really makes you feel good.
From the last man in the field to the first man in the finals. Meanwhile, Kenji Okazaki doing work on his own car. He's getting ready for Jim Epler in the funny car semifinal. We'll have that when we come back on NBC. And Steve Evans, Frank Hawley, happy to bring you the U.S. Nationals on NBC Sports World. Huge crowd on hand here today, and boy, they're getting quite a show. There's one right in front of them that's about to take place. The 14th qualifier, Pat Austin. Austin is doing better than he has all season long, and earlier Steve Evans may have found one of the reasons why he's doing so well.
The chassis under Pat Austin's top fuel dragster was built in-house at Walt Austin Racing by certified chassis builder Dave Jeffers. It has no suspension, like all the rest of the top fuel dragsters, and it is designed to flex, also like the rest of the field. But Dave Jeffers came up with a neat little slip joint here, where this tube can actually slide in this tube for more weight transfer and better traction. He also put in a couple of diagonals here and over here that most cars don't use. Well, this morning they'd tried everything else. They thought, what the heck, maybe we'll get more traction if we cut those diagonals out. So if Pat Austin wins the U.S. Nationals, his most valuable tool may have been a saw.
In the world of computers, engineers, and aerodynamicists, the saw is still very valuable.
That's right, it may have limbered up that car enough for a little better elapsed time. Well, something worked, including the driver. Pat Austin wins it on a hole shot. Coletta will be sick. Austin runs 491 to Coletta's 488.
Great job from the driver, great job from the crew chief and the car. What do you think?
Well, I feel real good, and Pat's really on today. And once we got the clutch working, his reaction times have came back, and the crew's just doing a fantastic job. We got the no-name crew over there, and they're learning the game.
You know, it's interesting, Brian. Pat Austin, in that he runs a sportsman car as well as his top fuel car, gets twice the seat time of any other driver, and there it pays off.
Austin wins it with the hole shot. And how about Scott Coletta running the lowest ET of the day at 488? But Austin with a 491 wins it, and he's pulling away. 293.82 the speed for Pat Austin compared to 284.62 for Scott Coletta.
That's right. Reaction time and top end charge proved to be a deadly combination.
So the final is now set for top fuel, and we've got Pat Austin, who hasn't been in a final since very early this year, against Doug Herbert. This will be his third final, and he won at Columbus. Now we go to the funny car action, the semifinal round, and Kenji Okazaki pulls his car into place against Jim Epler.
And so typical of the American sports fan. The further Kenji goes, the underdog, the more this crowd here gets behind him. Can he do it? Can he go to the finals?
Not if Jim Epler has anything to say about it.
Almost hits the wall, but Kenji Okazaki wins it. A career best performance of 5.19 seconds. The car slows to only 270 miles an hour. You may have seen the blower belt come off it just before it reached the finish line.
Epler had the hole shot. He also ran 291 miles an hour, 21 miles an hour faster than Kenji Okazaki, but Okazaki made it up in the middle of the racetrack to win the race with a 5:19. Epler ran a 5:22, and look how close he gets to the wall. And if Okazaki's blower belt would have come off just any sooner, Epler would have won the race. Okazaki's going to a final, and he's with Steve.
Can you believe this? You're going to the final round of the U.S. Nationals.
Sure I do. I'm happy.
The blower belt is off this car, and it still ran a 19, 5:19.
Really?
Oh,
That's the first team. That's good.
Okay, what about the final? Chances are you'll race John Force, you think?
50-50. That's what I say.
I agree.
Thank you.
We'll find out who his opponent is when we come back. Clark, it's getting to be crunch time in the 39th running of the U.S. Nationals. This is Pat Austin's crew doing the work on his top fueler as he gets ready to face Doug Herbert in the final.